I used to think that peace was found in silence, in the rhythm of waves brushing against the old pier behind my house, in the hum of the wind moving through the oaks. After my wife, Lillian, passed away 5 years ago, silence became both my comfort and my punishment. I filled my days with little things, polishing the tools in my workshop, tending to her rose garden, and sitting by the harbor in the evenings, watching the ships come and go. My son, Evan, didn't visit much. He was always somewhere else, somewhere busier, louder, more important. We used to be close, but that was before he started chasing money. When his mother died, he threw himself into work, saying he couldn't stand to be in that house anymore. I told myself he was grieving in his own way. But deep down, I knew distance had become easier for him than facing what we'd lost. That morning, I was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I've grown used to the quiet, but when I saw his name flash on the screen, my heart lifted a little. "Dad!" Evan's voice was unusually cheerful. "I was thinking, it's been a while since we had a drink together. How about tonight? I know a nice place by the river. Just you and me." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I was so surprised by his tone that I forgot to breathe. "You sure you have time for your old man?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Come on," he laughed. "I closed a big deal today. Let's celebrate it together. You'll like this pub, real Charleston style, by the water. 7 o'clock? I agreed before he could change his mind. After the call ended, I sat still for a long time, staring out at the sunlight glinting off the harbor. Maybe this was it, the start of something new. Maybe my son was finally remembering the father who taught him how to sail, who fixed his bike after every fall, who stood at the pier the day he left for college, waving until the boat disappeared. I spent the rest of the day preparing like a man going on his first date. I ironed my best shirt, polished my shoes, even dabbed a bit of Lillian's favorite cologne on my wrist, a habit I never quite let go of. In the mirror, I saw an older man with silver hair, tired eyes, but still a trace of pride left in his posture. Around dusk, I drove into the city. Charleston was glowing lanterns, hanging above cobblestone streets, the smell of salt and magnolia drifting through the warm air. It reminded me of the nights Lillian and I used to walk the pier, laughing over nothing at all. I found the pub easily. The Sailor's Rest. The name was carved into a weathered wooden sign, swaying slightly in the breeze. The windows were fogged with warmth, and the sound of laughter spilled out onto the street. Evan was already there, sitting at a corner table near the window. He looked sharp in his navy suit, younger than his 35 years. When he saw me, he stood and smiled. "Dad, you made it." He hugged me briefly, and for a second, I caught a glimpse of the boy I used to know, the boy who used to run to me after baseball practice, proud of every scraped knee. We sat down, and Evan waved to the waiter. "2 whiskeys," he said, grinning. "The good kind. We're celebrating tonight." I smiled, though I wasn't sure what exactly we were celebrating. I told him about the garden, about fixing the old boat, about how quiet the house had become. He listened, nodding, his phone occasionally lighting up beside him. He didn't touch it. That small act, ignoring his phone, felt like a gift. When the drinks arrived, the glass felt cool in my hand. Evan raised his eyes bright. "To us," he said. "To new beginnings." I clinked my glass against his. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat. For the first time in years, I thought maybe things could still be mended. Maybe time hadn't taken everything. But just as I set the glass down, I noticed something strange. The bartender, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, was staring at me, not in recognition, but with worry. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. I brushed it off. Maybe she'd mistaken me for someone else. Later, when Evan excused himself to make a quick call outside, the bartender approached our table to clear the glasses. She leaned in slightly and said in a low voice, "You, Mr. Lane?" "Yes," I replied, surprised. Her eyes darted toward the door Evan had gone through, then back to me. "If I were you, sir," she whispered, "I'd be careful tonight. Before I could ask what she meant, she straightened, forcing a polite smile, and walked away. The glass in front of me caught the light from the lamp above, and for a moment, I thought I saw something, a faint haze, floating on the surface of the drink Evan had ordered. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice said, "Something isn't right." Evan came back inside a few minutes later, slipping his phone into his pocket, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry, Dad," he said. "Just business, you know how it is." I nodded, pretending not to notice how tense his shoulders looked. He waved to the bartender for another round, but she didn't come right away. She was at the far end of the counter, talking quietly to another staff member, her expression serious. The place was warm, filled with laughter, the clink of glasses, and the low strum of a guitar from a small stage near the window. It should have felt welcoming, but something about the air felt off, too heavy, like the calm before a thunderstorm. "So," Evan began, leaning back in his chair, "you still working on that old boat? What's it called again, the Lily and Grace?" I smiled faintly. "Still floating, though it takes me half a day to get her out of the dock." He laughed. "You and that boat. Mom would be proud." I watched him closely. His words were right, but the tone was wrong, too polished, too deliberate. Evan had always been charming when he wanted something. As a boy, he could talk his way out of any punishment, with one quick smile. But now, that same charm carried something else behind it: calculation. He poured me another drink from the bottle the waiter had left on the table. "To Mom," he said, lifting his glass. I hesitated, but I lifted mine too. "To your mother," I said softly. The whiskey burned again, but this time, it didn't feel comforting. My thoughts kept circling back to the bartender's whisper, "I'd be careful tonight." "Tell me about this deal you're celebrating," I asked, hoping to sound casual. Evan's eyes flickered. "Just business stuff. A new property development downtown. We're partnering with some investors from Atlanta." "Investors?" I repeated. "That sounds big." He smiled tightly. "It is. They're, well, serious people. This deal could change everything for me." I noticed the way his fingers tapped against the table, restless. "You've been working hard," I said. "But I hope you're being careful. People in that line of work—" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Dad, please, I know what I'm doing." There it was, the edge in his voice. The same one he used years ago when he told me he didn't need my advice anymore. Before I could respond, a group of men in dark suits walked in. They looked out of place, too formal for a Riverside pub. One of them, tall with slicked back hair and a scar along his jaw, glanced around before spotting Evan. He nodded slightly. Evan's face changed. For a moment, the confident son I knew disappeared, replaced by something nervous, almost fearful. Then he masked it with a grin. "Ah, that's them. The guys I was telling you about." "They're your business partners?" I asked quietly. "Yeah," he said quickly. "I told them we might drop by. Hope you don't mind, Dad." Before I could answer, the men approached our table. The one with the scar leaned down, shaking Evan's hand firmly. "Evening," he said, in a voice smooth as smoke. Then his eyes turned to me. "So this is the old man, huh?" Something about the way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Yes," Evan said, forcing a chuckle. "This is my dad, Richard Lane." The man nodded slowly. "Pleasure." He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he looked at our table, the half-empty bottle, the untouched drink, and smiled thinly. "Looks like you're celebrating something special." Evan laughed again, too loudly. Yeah. Big day. I just wanted my dad here to share it." The man's eyes lingered on me, then on my glass. I could swear there was amusement in them, cruel, knowing amusement. After a few moments, they moved to another table nearby. I watched as they ordered drinks and kept glancing our way. Evan tried to keep the conversation light, but his attention was elsewhere. His phone buzzed once. He looked down, then quickly turned it face down on the table. I decided to test something. "I'll get the next round," I said, standing up. Evan looked startled. "You don't have to, Dad. I got it." "I insist," I said. I walked to the counter. Caroline, the bartender, was wiping down glasses. When she saw me, her face went pale. "Sir," she said under her breath, "please, don't drink anything he gives you. Not tonight." I froze. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward Evan's table. "Those men he's with, they come here often. And your son? He's in deep trouble with them. Please trust me, Mr. Lane. You're not here for a celebration." I felt the room tilt slightly. The sound of laughter distant and hollow. Before I could ask anything else, Evan's voice called out, cheerful and loud, "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" Caroline straightened instantly, forcing a smile. "Enjoy your night, sir." I turned back, nodding, my heart pounding. When I sat down again, Evan raised his glass. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled faintly. "Just remembering something," I said. I looked at the drink he'd poured for me, the faint shimmer on its surface catching the light. And that quiet voice inside me whispered again, clearer this time, "Something isn't right at all." I couldn't shake the bartender's warning as I stared at the drink Evan had poured for me. The faint shimmer on the surface seemed almost unnatural under the warm pub lights, a signal that something was very wrong. My hands trembled slightly as I set the glass down, pretending to sip from it while keeping my eyes on him. Evan noticed the hesitation. "Dad, you okay?" he asked, leaning closer. His voice was casual, but there was a tension I hadn't noticed before, a sharpness lurking beneath the charm. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired from the drive." He nodded slowly, but the way he watched me made my stomach twist. He wasn't just observing, he was calculating, waiting for my reaction. I took a deep breath, forcing calm. If something was happening tonight, I needed to think clearly. I glanced around. The three men in suits kept their distance, but their eyes never left our table. The scarred one, in particular, seemed to enjoy the quiet menace, smirking every time he caught my gaze. Then I saw her, Caroline. She appeared behind the counter again, wiping glasses but keeping an eye on me. She made a subtle gesture, tilting her head toward the door. I understood. She was trying to warn me again. I leaned slightly toward Evan. "I need to ask you something," I said, lowering my voice. "Those men, are they part of your business deal?" He hesitated. The smile on his face faltered, just enough for me to see it. "Yes, Dad," he said finally. "But they're just investors. You don't need to worry." His words didn't match the tension in the air. I could feel it, a hidden danger, like a current under calm waters. The bartender approached, carrying a tray with 2 clean glasses. She placed them carefully in front of me. "Sir," she said softly, "if anything happens tonight, do not drink what they offer. I don't know the details, but you need to trust me." Evan's eyes narrowed slightly at her warning, but he didn't say anything. I pretended to pour myself a sip from the bottle on the table, careful to keep it separate. Caroline gave me a subtle nod, relief visible on her face. Her trust bolstered me. Maybe she knew something I didn't yet. Maybe she had a plan. Then it happened. One of the suited men, the scarred one, leaned closer to Evan. I could hear snippets of their conversation over the soft music and chatter. Words like profit, control, deadline, eliminate. I froze. "Eliminate?" I whispered under my breath, trying to convince myself I misheard. But Caroline's pale, tense expression confirmed that my instincts were right. I tried to maintain calm, acting like nothing was wrong. I raised my glass slightly, meeting Evan's gaze. "To new opportunities," I said, my voice steady. Evan hesitated, then clinked his glass against mine. But that familiar warmth, the father-son connection, was gone, replaced by something I hadn't expected: fear and betrayal. The scarred man leaned back and signaled for the others to move away, leaving Evan and me alone again. "You've got a good poker face, old man," he said casually, loud enough for me to hear. "But you're not as clueless as you pretend." I swallowed hard, trying not to show the shock I felt. Caroline had warned me, and now it was real. The people my son was dealing with weren't just investors. They were dangerous. and I had no idea how far he had already gone. Evan finally spoke, voice low and urgent. "Dad, I can explain. It's complicated. I didn't want you to know." I looked at him, searching for the boy I once knew, but all I saw was someone I barely recognized. The charm, the laughter, it was a mask for something darker, something I wasn't prepared to face. Before I could respond, Caroline came around the counter again, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "Follow my lead," she whispered. "I know a way out if things get worse." My heart pounded. I realized then that this night, a simple father-son drink had become a turning point. Evan had drawn me here, but not for a casual evening. Something larger, more dangerous, was at play, and it was my responsibility to survive it. I met Caroline's eyes, saw the urgency, and nodded ever so slightly. I wasn't ready to trust my son tonight, not fully. But I knew I had to stay alert, watch every move, and wait for the right moment to act. As the music played softly, the pub felt smaller, the shadows longer. The first signs of Evan's secret world were now clear, and I knew there was no turning back. I took another careful sip from my glass, ignoring the shimmer, and steeled myself. Whatever happened next, I had to be ready for betrayal, for danger, and for the shocking truth my son had hidden from me all these years. Caroline disappeared toward the back of the pub, and for a few seconds I was alone again with Evan. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses around us suddenly felt distant, muffled, like a radio fading through static. I could see the faint reflection of the men in suits in the mirror behind the bar watching, waiting. Evan leaned forward, his smile forced. "Dad," he said softly, "I know you're wondering what's going on. Just hear me out, okay?" I nodded, though every instinct in my body told me not to trust him. He took a deep breath, looking around before continuing. "I've been working on something big, real big. But there were complications. Some deals went sideways. People got nervous. I just need a little help to straighten it all out." I frowned. "What kind of help?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward the men again. "You've still got Mom's life insurance money sitting in that trust, right? And the house, the one by the harbor, it's paid off. You could—" "No." The word came out before he finished. "Whatever hole you're in, Evan, you don't drag your family into it." "Dad, it's not like that," he said quickly, voice tightening. "It's just temporary. I need to transfer ownership of the house just on paper so I can show it as collateral for a short-term loan. Once I pay them back, I'll transfer it right back to you. It's just business." I stared at him. "Collateral for a loan? From who?" He swallowed hard. "You met them tonight." My chest went cold. The air in the room seemed to thin out. "Those men? Dad, please." His tone shifted from confidence to desperation. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. But they don't give second chances. If I can't show them something solid by tomorrow, they'll con." He cut himself off, rubbing the back of his neck. "They'll what?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. His silence was enough. I looked down at the table at the glass he'd poured, untouched, still glimmering under the light. He was scared, yes, but not just for himself. He was cornered, and cornered men make bad choices. Caroline returned then, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. "Another round, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice steady. Evan shook his head. "We're good." She set down a napkin beside my hand, her fingers brushing mine for just a second, enough to feel the tremor in them. Written faintly in pen across the napkin were 3 words: "Don't sign anything." I looked up at her, and for the briefest moment, her eyes met mine. They were pleading. Evan noticed the pause. "Something wrong, Dad?" "No," I said, sliding the napkin discreetly under my sleeve. "Just thinking about what you said." He exhaled, relieved. "Good. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just a technical thing. You'd still live in the house, it's just a piece of paper. We can sign everything right now. I even brought the forms." He reached down, opening his leather folder. Inside, I saw a neat stack of documents with colored tabs, The top page was labeled Power of Attorney. My throat tightened. "You brought paperwork to a bar?" He gave a nervous laugh. "I figured it'd be easier this way, less formal, you know." Less formal? That was one way to describe it. More like no witnesses. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my face calm, even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "Let me take a look first," I said evenly. Evan hesitated. "It's pretty straightforward. I'm not signing anything without reading it." That was when his mask slipped just a little. The easy smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. His eyes, so like his mother's once, turned cold. "Dad," he said, voice low, "you don't have time to read it." I stared at him. "Why not?" He hesitated again, glancing over his shoulder. The scarred man was watching us now, tapping a finger against his glass. "Because," Evan whispered, "they're waiting for me to finish this deal tonight. If I don't, things get complicated." Complicated. That word hung in the air like a threat. "I'm sorry, son," I said finally. "But I'm not doing this." He clenched his jaw. "Dad, please. I'm trying to protect both of us." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to protect yourself." The scarred man stood up. The others followed. The pub's warm chatter faded as they approached. Caroline froze behind the counter, gripping a bottle like she might have to use it. The man's smile was thin. "Everything all right here, Mr. Lane?" Evan stammered. "Yeah, just convincing my dad. He's old-fashioned." The man nodded slowly. "Understandable, but time's not on your side." I met his eyes, calm now. "Then maybe you should find another deal," I said. A flicker of amusement passed across his face. "That's not how this works." He looked at Evan. "You have 1 hour. Fix it." Then he turned and walked toward the back door, the others following. Evan's face was ashen. "Dad, please, you don't understand what they'll do." "Maybe I don't," I said, standing up. "But I understand this. You tried to sell your own father's home. You tried to trick me, and that's something you'll have to live with." He reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "Sit down, Evan," I said, "and don't follow me." Caroline appeared by the kitchen door, nodding once. I slipped behind her, past the clatter of dishes and the hum of the refrigerators. A narrow back hallway led to a metal door half hidden by crates. She pushed it open. "Go," she whispered. "Now." Cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of the river. I stepped out into the darkness, heart pounding, and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Evan shouting my name, but I kept walking. I didn't know it yet, but what waited in that alley would not just break my heart, it would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my son. The cold hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. The door shut behind me with a dull metallic click, sealing off the noise of the pub. For a moment, all I could hear was the wind and the slow drip of water from the eaves. The narrow alley stretched behind the building, dark, damp, and smelling faintly of the river. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady my breath. My hands were trembling, not from fear exactly, but from the surge of something worse. Disbelief. My own son had brought me here, not to celebrate, but to use me. The thought burned in my chest like acid. A voice echoed faintly from inside Evans, muffled at first, then louder, sharper. "Dad, Dad, come back!" I stayed where I was, my back pressed to the wall. His footsteps thudded across the wooden floor inside, then stopped. Silence. A door creaked open somewhere down the alley. I ducked behind a row of trash bins, the smell of stale beer and garbage thick in the air. A figure stepped into the alley. Evan. He wasn't alone. The man with the scar followed, his dark coat gleaming under the flicker of a neon sign. 2 others came after, moving like shadows. I crouched lower, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Where is he?" the scarred man asked, his voice low and cold. Evan shook his head quickly. "He's gone. I don't know where." "You don't know?" The man's tone turned mocking. "You said this would be simple. An old man, a signature, a few drinks. That's what you told me. "I'll find him," Evan said. "He won't go far." The man laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carried no humor at all. "You'd better hope you do. Because if this falls through, you're finished. I've already been patient." He stepped closer, gripping Evan by the collar. "You think I enjoy cleaning up other people's messes? You think your name means anything in my world?" Evan's voice broke. "Please, I just need more time." "Time?" The man released him with a shove. "Time's a luxury you can't afford." For a long moment, no one spoke. I could see Evan's shoulders trembling. The proud, confident son who'd walked into that pub hours earlier was gone. In his place was a man undone by fear and by his own lies. "Tomorrow," the scarred man said finally, "you bring me proof that you control that property, or you'll be the one signing papers you don't understand." They turned to leave, the man lighting a cigarette, as he disappeared into the fog at the end of the alley. Evan slumped against the wall, his head in his hands. I stayed hidden, frozen in place. I should have felt anger, betrayal. But what filled me instead was something deeper: grief. The kind that comes from watching someone you love become a stranger. Evan pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and made a call. His voice was low, desperate. "It didn't work." "No, he didn't sign." "Yes, I know what's at stake. Please, just give me until morning." He ended the call and slid down the wall until he was sitting on the wet ground. His face was pale in the dim light, his eyes hollow. I remembered when he was 12, the night he broke his arm falling from the pier. He'd cried then, afraid of disappointing me. I'd carried him home in my arms, whispering, "It's okay, son. I've got you." And now here we were, decades later, in a filthy alley, me hiding from him, and him bargaining with criminals. A soft voice pulled me back. "Mr. Lane." I turned. Caroline was standing a few feet away, her coat pulled tight against the cold. I hadn't even heard her follow me. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll come back." "How do you know all this?" I asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I used to work for them, not the same men, but the same kind. They target desperate people, men like your son. They promise money, power, connections, and when the lies fall apart, they take everything, including their souls." I swallowed hard. "And you think he's too far gone?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but he's close. You need to be careful. If they can't use him, they'll use you." Her words settled over me like the fog, cold, heavy, inescapable. Evan stood then, kicking a bottle out of his way. He looked around the alley, scanning the shadows. For a terrifying second, I thought he'd seen us. But he didn't. He just muttered something under his breath, a curse, a prayer, maybe both, and walked away, disappearing around the corner. Caroline touched my arm lightly. "Go home, Mr. Lane. Lock your doors. Whatever he's gotten into, it's not over." I nodded numbly. "Thank you for warning me." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Just promise me you won't trust him until you know everything." When I finally stepped out onto the empty street, the city lights shimmered against the water. The world looked the same, but nothing felt the same anymore. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to an old motel by the highway, the kind with flickering signs and thin walls. I sat on the bed, staring at my reflection in the window, an old man with haunted eyes. The truth was simple, and it cut deep. My son wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save himself, even if it meant destroying me in the process. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt, a new feeling began to take shape, not anger, not sorrow, but resolve. If my son thought I was too old to fight back, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay on the stiff motel bed, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence, staring at the ceiling until the first hint of dawn bled through the curtains. Every sound, a door shutting down the hall, a car engine outside, made me flinch. The image of Evan in that alley replayed in my head, over and over. His pleading voice, the fear in his eyes, the man with the scar. Every piece fit together into a pattern I didn't want to see. At 6 a.m., I gave up on trying to rest. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my old flip phone, and stared at the contacts list. There was only one name I could call, someone I hadn't spoken to since Lillian's funeral. I dialed. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, groggy but sharp. Mr. Lane? Hello, Charlotte, I said quietly. A pause. Then, warmer. Richard? It's been years. What's wrong? Charlotte Quinn had been Lillian's best friend, and one of the fiercest attorneys I'd ever met. She was the kind of woman who could dismantle a corporate executive in a courtroom without ever raising her voice. I think my son's in trouble, I said, and I think he's dragging me down with him. I told her everything, the dinner, the paperwork, the alley, the men in suits. I left out nothing. There was a long silence on the line when I finished. Do you still have the documents he tried to make you sign? She asked. No, he kept them. But I saw the first page. It said power of attorney. Charlotte swore under her breath. If he got you to sign those, Richard, he'd control everything you own, your accounts, your house, even medical decisions. It's a complete surrender of your rights. He could liquidate your assets in a day. My stomach tightened. He said it was temporary. A formality for investors. That's the oldest lie in the book, she said flatly. Listen to me. You need to find out exactly how deep this goes. Check your bank accounts, property records, everything. And whatever you do, don't go back to his house. Her voice softened then. Richard, I know this hurts, but your son's crossed a line. You can't appeal to his conscience anymore. You have to protect yourself. I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I'll handle it, I said finally. Thank you, Charlotte. After we hung up, I dressed and drove to my bank downtown. The manager, an old friend named Carl, looked surprised to see me. Richard, haven't seen you in months. Morning, Carl, I said. I need to check something, withdrawals, transfers, anything in the last few weeks. He frowned but nodded. Of course. 10 minutes later he came back with a printout. You've had some activity, all right, he said, confusion on his face. 2 withdrawals, both online. About $15,000 total. I didn't make those, I said quietly. Carl's expression darkened. Then someone did it for you. I stared at the paper. The transfers had gone through a secondary account, one that had been added recently. The name on it made my blood run cold. Evan Lane, authorized agent. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. My son hadn't just lied. He'd already begun taking from me. I left the bank with a storm brewing in my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove to the house by the harbor, the one Lillian and I built. The one Evan had called a burden. When I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of salt and lemon polish greeted me. The light filtered through the curtains, just as it had when Lillian used to hum while cooking breakfast. For a moment, the memories nearly broke me. Then I remembered something she had told me years ago, near the end. If anything ever happens to me, Richard, she'd said softly, look under the old cedar chest in our room. There's a file. I called it my insurance, not for me, for us. I walked into the bedroom. The cedar chest sat at the foot of the bed, just as it always had. I got down on my knees, ignoring the protest in my joints, and lifted the lid. Inside were blankets, photo albums, and beneath them, a thin leather folder. I opened it carefully. Inside were property deeds, trust forms, and a handwritten letter. The ink was faded but unmistakable, Lillian's script. Richard, if you're reading this, it means things have gone wrong. I set up a trust for the house. It's no longer in our names. It belongs to the Charleston Community Fund, in our honor. No one can sell it or use it as collateral. Not even Evan. I did this because I saw what was happening to him. He's lost himself in the pursuit of money. If the day ever comes when he tries to use our home for his gain, you'll have proof that it isn't his to take. I love you. Please protect what's real. Tears blurred my vision. Lillian had seen it all before I did. She'd known the storm was coming, and she'd built a shelter I hadn't even realized existed. I looked through the rest of the folder. Attached was a certified document bearing a notary seal proof that the house had been transferred years ago into a charitable trust. Irrevocable. Permanent. My breath came out shaky. Half a laugh. Half a sob. "You brilliant woman," I whispered. "You saved us." The grief I'd carried for years transformed in that moment into something new strength. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had the truth. And the truth was stronger than any lie my son could spin. I picked up the phone again and called Charlotte. "I found it," I said simply. There was a smile in her voice when she answered. "Then, it's time to make them face it." By the time the sun began to set, Charleston glowed in shades of gold and fire. I watched the water shimmer outside my window, feeling the old ache in my chest. Our house stood solid around me, the wood beams humming with the memory of Lillian's laughter. I had the folder on the table beside me, its contents spread neatly across the surface. The trust document, the notarized transfer, Lillian's letter. My heart beat steady now. I wasn't afraid anymore. Charlotte called just before 6. "I've been reviewing the paperwork," she said. "Everything's airtight. That house hasn't belonged to you or Evan for years. If he tries to use it as collateral, he's committing fraud." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Then I think it's time we end this." She hesitated. "Richard, you're sure you want to face them yourself?" "Yes," I said quietly. "He's my son, and he needs to hear this from me." We made a plan. Charlotte would meet us at the office of the man Evan worked with, his supposed investor, whose name I now knew, Marcus Thorne, the man with the scar. Evan called an hour later, his voice strained but hopeful. "Dad, I'm sorry about last night. I was under pressure. Can we meet? Just talk. Marcus wants to clear things up. He said he can still help us if we act fast." "Of course, son," I said evenly. "Let's meet." He exhaled in relief. "Thank you. You won't regret this." But I already knew who would. Thorne's office sat high above the city, a sleek glass tower overlooking the harbor. When I stepped out of the elevator, the air smelled like cold steel and expensive cologne. The walls gleamed. The silence was heavy. Evan was waiting in the reception area, pacing. When he saw me, his face broke into a forced smile. "Dad, you came." "I said I would," I replied, my voice calm. He looked nervous, his suit immaculate, but his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Behind him, through a half-open door, I saw Thorne sitting at a large desk, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows. He was speaking quietly into a phone, his expression unreadable. Evan gestured toward the office. "Come on, he's ready for us." As we entered, Thorne stood, extending his hand. "Mr. Lane," he said smoothly, "it's an honor to finally meet you." I didn't take his hand. "The honor's not mutual," I said evenly. His lips twitched into a smirk. "I can respect a man who speaks plainly." He gestured for us to sit. "Now, shall we get this over with?" Evan hurried to my side, placing a folder in front of me. "Dad, it's the same paperwork as before, nothing complicated. Just sign, and we'll be free of all this." I looked at the folder but didn't open it. My fingers rested on the worn leather of Lillian's trust file instead. "You've had a long day, Evan," I said softly. "Why don't we start by clearing the air?" Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Lane, this isn't a therapy session." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway. "It's exactly that." Charlotte stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her calm presence filled the room with quiet authority. She set her briefcase down beside me and offered a tight, polite smile. "Charlotte Quinn, legal counsel for Mr. Lane." Evan blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "What is this? You brought a lawyer?" Thorne's smirk faltered. "That wasn't part of our understanding." "Oh," Charlotte said lightly, opening her briefcase. "It's part of mine." She laid a single sheet of paper on the desk. "Before anyone signs anything, there's something you both should see." I took the file from the table, Lillian's file, and placed it beside hers. The sound of the folder hitting the polished wood echoed like a gavel. "This," I said, "is the true ownership record for the property on Harbor Street. My home, the one you tried to make me sign away." Evan frowned. "Dad, what are you—" Charlotte cut him off. "It's an irrevocable trust," she said sharply. "Filed 5 years ago under the Charleston Community Fund. Your mother placed the deed there before she died. Neither of you owns it. Any attempt to transfer or sell it is not just invalid, it's criminal." The room went still. Evan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face drained of color. Thorne leaned back in his chair, his smile gone. "Is that so?" Charlotte slid the notarized document toward him. "You can verify the registration yourself. It's on public record. I'd suggest you do that before involving yourself in what would be considered wire fraud, bank fraud, and elder abuse, all federal offenses." The word federal landed like thunder. Thorne's gaze hardened. "Your son came to me," he said slowly. "He assured me the property was his. He even provided fake documents." Evan shook his head violently. "No, Marcus, please, you knew." Thorne slammed his hand on the desk, making him flinch. "I knew what you told me. You said you had collateral. And now you bring me this?" He stood abruptly, his voice sharp and dangerous. "Do you have any idea what kind of people I answer to?" Evan stammered. "I can fix it. I swear." "No," Thorne hissed. "You can't fix this." He turned toward me, his tone suddenly calm again, too calm. "Mr. Lane, I suggest you and your lawyer leave. This conversation is over." Charlotte stood smoothly. "Gladly. But you might want to expect a call from the Attorney General's office. They take elder financial manipulation very seriously." Thorne's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Evan sat in silence, his hands trembling on the desk. The son I once admired, smart, ambitious, full of promise, now looked like a broken child, surrounded by the ruins of his own deceit. I placed my hand gently on the folder. "Your mother saw this coming, Evan," I said softly. "She tried to protect you from yourself." He looked up, eyes red. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "You just didn't think I'd ever see it." Charlotte touched my arm. "We're done here." I stood, the weight of years pressing on my shoulders, but also something new, something lighter, strength. As we walked toward the door, I paused, turning back once more. "You said something last night, Evan, that I was old-fashioned. Maybe I am. But there's one thing age teaches you that money never will. What's real always outlasts what's fake." Then I walked out, leaving him and Thorne sitting in the cold silence of their own collapse. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant fires. For the first time in years, I felt Lillian beside me, not as a memory, but as a presence, her voice in the back of my mind, calm and proud. "You did the right thing, Richard." I smiled. I finally learned from the best. The air outside Thorne's tower was sharp with the coming rain. I stood on the sidewalk, feeling the first drops fall against my face. Charlotte walked beside me, silent, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the quiet old man in the corner of a younger world. I felt like myself again. Richard Lane, husband to Lillian, father to a boy who'd lost his way, and a man who'd finally learned that love without boundaries can become its own kind of blindness. Charlotte exhaled, slipping her hands into her coat pockets. "He'll face consequences," she said. "Thorne, too. But your son—" I nodded slowly. "I know. He's already facing them." She looked at me. "You're not pressing charges, are you?" I shook my head. "No. There's no prison worse than the one he's built for himself." She studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You sound like Lillian." That made me laugh quietly, but from the heart. "That's the best compliment you could have given me." We said our goodbyes outside the courthouse steps. She offered her hand, but I hugged her instead. "Thank you, Charlotte, for everything." She patted my shoulder. "Take care of yourself, old man." and take care of that house. It's more than walls and windows now. It's proof that love can outlast even betrayal. I watched her leave, the rain turning into a steady drizzle. Then I walked home. The next morning, Charleston was washed clean by the rain. The streets shone under a pale blue sky, and the harbor glittered like glass. When I reached the house, I paused by the gate, the old wood damp beneath my hand. It still felt solid, still felt like home. Inside, the air carried Lillian's scent, lemon oil, cinnamon, something soft and floral that always reminded me of her hair when she worked in the garden. I set the trust folder back in the cedar chest where I'd found it, smoothing the blankets over it as if tucking her secret back to sleep. She'd built that failsafe not out of distrust, but love, the kind that endures when words and promises fail. The phone rang around noon. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Then I picked it up. It was Evan. "Dad." His voice was hoarse, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "They're gone. Thorne and his people, they cut me out completely. My firm's collapsing. I don't have a place to stay." I closed my eyes. "You still have a father," I said quietly. There was silence on the other end. Then a choked sound, half a sob, half a sigh. "I don't deserve that." "No," I said gently. "You don't. But your mother believed in second chances. I suppose I can too." He didn't speak for a while. Then, "What do you want me to do?" I looked out the window, toward the harbor. The Lillian Grace rocked gently at its moor, the same boat he and I had built decades ago. "You can start by coming home," I said. "Not as a businessman, as a son. You'll help me fix the garden, paint the porch, maybe rebuild what's left of yourself." He didn't answer right away, but when he finally spoke, his voice was steadier. "All right. I'll be there." "Good," I said, and hung up. 2 weeks passed before I saw him again. He showed up in jeans and an old sweatshirt, no suit, no mask of confidence, just Evan. He looked tired, older somehow, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen in years: humility. We worked side by side in the yard that day, clearing weeds from the rose beds. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was healing. When the sun dipped below the horizon, I poured us each a cup of coffee and we sat on the porch steps. The sound of crickets rose from the grass and the harbor lights flickered in the distance. "Mom really thought ahead," he said finally, his voice soft. "She always did," I replied. "She saw people clearly even when we didn't want her to." He nodded, staring at his hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. I was drowning. And instead of asking for help, I tried to pull you down with me." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the man who betrayed me. I saw the frightened boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms. "We all drown sometimes," I said quietly. "The trick is remembering who's still reaching out to pull you up." He met my gaze, eyes glistening. "Can I ever make it right?" "Start by living honestly," I said. "That's what your mother would have wanted." He nodded. "I'll try." We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. The night air smelled of salt and jasmine. The porch light flickered, casting a warm glow over the house that had survived everything: storms, grief, betrayal, time. I looked around and thought of Lillian, of the way she used to hum when she watered the roses, of how her laughter still seemed to linger in the rafters. She had built this home not just of wood and nails, but of faith. Faith that love could rebuild what pride destroys. And she was right. Sometimes I still go down to the harbor in the evenings. I sit on the dock, listening to the water lapping against the posts. People pass by and nod politely. They see an old man watching the tide. But inside, I know the truth. I'm not just watching the sea. I'm watching the horizon, the place where everything broken can still be made whole. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family isn't about perfection. It's about protection of the heart, of the truth, of what's worth keeping when everything else falls away. Our real legacy isn't the house, or the money, or even the name we leave behind. It's the strength to stand up when the world calls you weak. It's the courage to forgive without forgetting. And it's the quiet power of knowing that dignity once defended never fades. That's what Lillian taught me. And that's what I'll teach my son before my own story ends.